Good morning. And today we are getting a handle on debt. And we're using some great tools from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And my name is Susan Bradford. I know many of you already, and some folks are new. I'm one of the social workers here at CAC, and I do the education and training for the program. So today we're going to look at this little book, the Octopus Book, as a toolkit. And it is a series of books that I think are really, really helpful, that breaks it down into simple, digestible pieces. And today we're going to do a review on how you can use this toolkit. So my first disclaimer is I am a social worker. I'm not a financial advisor, and I don't suggest I have any authority to dispense legal or financial advice, but this training is a part of our ongoing conversation on finances, and I take it from a social work perspective. And we learn together as we go. You'll find that I share some of my own personal challenges and joys in accomplishing a little bit more financial security. Our training agenda for this time, we have our introduction. We're going to do an overview of the 8 tools in this book. And then we're going to dive into 2 sections. One is what debts do I owe? And the other is prioritizing debts during tight months. But quite honestly, what month isn't a tight month? This just kind of helps us figure out individually how to prioritize our debts. And then we're going to go over a few resources, both in this booklet and a few community resources that I wanted to add on to the book. So let's first start. If you open up the first page, and on the left is who is the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And they're a wonderful organization that was created in 2010 in response to the national financial crisis. And it is a way to put tools in our hands for ordinary people to do a little bit better, so we can enjoy a more financially sound home and safer, better financial lives. So we have these programs here at CAC. It's part of an overall program called Your Money, Your Goals. And if you ever want more information, which you might, because again, I'm not a financial expert, I suggest that you go to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and check out the different programs that they have online and the things that you can download. You can order material for free. We have copies of all of these books here at CAC, and you should have a few delivered to you from your case managers that we're going to look at over this month and next month. So in this handy book, if you look at the next page, these are the 8 tools that can help us in this particular book. And the sections are, what debts do I owe? How do I check my credit report? There's a student loan checklist. There's a section on reaching your goals, your debt action plan. There's a seasonal snapshot. So what do you do if your expenses change during the year? Then there's the section on prioritizing debt payments, dealing with debt collectors, and then our resource cards. So each section has a different critter that represents that section. So we're going to, throughout this training, I call this the Octopus Book, but we're going to go to the different sections identified by the different animals. So if you open up the card, we have a double spread insert that talks about our debt picture. And really, this is much like what we've talked about in our previous trainings, my relationship with money and why is budgeting so hard sometimes. The debt picture is a way for us to kind of just get ourselves organized and take a look at what our full picture is in terms of our debt. So what they invite us to do is to look at this board and to use a pen or a highlighter to circle the debts that you have, and then to put a star on the ones that concern you the most. And you can use this little tool in any order. It's really just to kind of help us get a clear idea on the various categories. I know that, for example, and I'm always confessing these things, I really hope y'all know that, you know, I'm learning as I go, but I have had bills go into collection because I forgot them. I know that sounds crazy. A lot of times things go into collections because we just don't know how to pay them. But I actually had a phone bill, and I had moved from one county to another. And so I was using a new phone system, and I totally forgot about the $48 on the previous bill. And I was reminded of that after it went into collections. So if I had been better organized, I would have kept a copy of that bill, and I would have added it to my whole debt collection, and hopefully addressed it before it went into collections and before it dinged my credit score. So, you know, it's hard not to feel overwhelmed by all of the bills that we have to carry in a household. And I think the intention that the authors of this book have is to make this little pictorial to help make it more digestible, really, so it's not as overwhelming and not quite as stressful. So in the back page, if you close the insert and flip it, they remind us that these tools are for our own personal use, that this is not a replacement for credit counseling or as an accountant. I guess it's their own disclaimer as well, kind of like the one I do in the beginning of our trainings. So let's move forward a little bit. The next page is the ducks. And it invites us to ask the question, how much do you think you spend on debts each month? And just like the activities we discussed in budgeting class, where we, talked about the pros and cons of budgeting and what are some good reasons to budget, we talked a lot about documenting our income, documenting our expenses. And this just kind of reinforces that having a list of those bills gives us a clear picture of what we owe. It also not only what we owe, but this tool helps us figure out when our payments are due. And it also helps us to remember those debt payments, and kind of helps us start building our strategy. This is all skill building. And, I want to say right now, some of you have already completed the financial literacy pretest. We sent out a pretest to everybody just to take a look at, like, what does everyone know when we're starting these conversations? And most of you know all this information. So it's not like we're uncovering, a ton of new info. Really, these trainings are to reinforce good habits and to talk it out with someone and to just remind ourselves of what we already know. And the tricky part is taking all this that we know and doing it. that's the challenge. That's the challenge, is doing it. So what you need to do is a little bit of paperwork. Now, if you're like me, I hope you're not like me. At my house, I have a basket on the dining room table that all the bills get siphoned into. And so all the paper mail goes in there, and then I get a bunch of statements in my email. Some of the companies I have email, some of them are auto drafted. So what we need to do is we need to collect all the mail with the bills. We need to print out all of your auto drafts, go back to the original contracts if you need to. And you want to pull up due dates. You want to take a look at those credit cards and take a look at the interest rates. And you can also pull up, and I suggest you do this, to pull up your credit score. And there is a section in the book, it's the next section, the rabbit section, how do you check your credit report? And the reason I do this, our society is obsessed with those credit numbers. What is your credit score? What is your credit score? And it can be really disheartening when yours is low. But the more important reason today that I want you to pull up your credit check is to make sure that there isn't any surprises in there, like that telephone bill that I didn't know about. So make sure that someone isn't reporting a bill that you paid off. Sometimes these mistakes happen. So, take some time to pull up your credit report to take a look at that. I have an app on my phone that I use. A lot of times our banks will allow us to check our credit, but there's also this section in this handy dandy book that tells you how you can pick up your credit report for free. So you want to get all these things together. And if you open up the insert, you have a log. And now many of you may need more pages, and you may want to use a log that you pick up online, or maybe some of you have like a journal that you log these things in. But we've talked about the importance of writing things down, of income and expenses. Well, we're going to look at it just a little bit closer. This time, we're looking at the types of debt that we have. So like our auto loans, our auto insurance. Do you owe child support? Are there court fees? Are there credit cards? Do you owe some family and friends? Medical debt is a big one. Any past due fines and fees, any traffic tickets, your mortgage or rent, payday loans, big one, and any student loans you have. And you want to write it all down. And the bolded area, if you look on the log, the bolded area is the amount. But then we also want to look at the due dates. Are the bills up to date? What are the interest rates on any of these items? That's a really important question. That's something new that I've learned. It was actually my husband who got me kind of hip to looking at interest rates. How much is left on the total bill? What's your date for paying it off? And then any notes that you might have. So you kind of want to get it all down on paper. And you want to look at what is your total monthly payment amount. So this will give you an idea of, we know what's coming in the house, but taking a look at what's expected to go out of the house. Now, this doesn't take today's training, isn't an overall budgeting. It's kind of specifically about debt, because we also have things like, we have to put gas in the car, and we have to buy groceries, and we need petty cash for things. So this exercise is more just kind of the overall debt. Before we get on to our beaver, I want to look at the back. Let's go back. Look at the back page when you close the insert. And this gives you the various list of documents that can help you fill in the blanks. And we talked about this. Pulling up your credit report, pulling up your credit card statements, your loan or mortgage, because we're looking at interest rates, court-ordered payments, billing statements, and they give you a website in reference to student loans. So, and we're not going to cover student loans today. What I want to mention is that there is some wonderful programs, or there are some wonderful programs that can help with student loan debt. I guess my statement on student loan debt is this. There was a time in my life where I was in default on a student loan. And it took me several years to get right with it. But then once I did, I was eligible to borrow money and to go to school. So when you finally, like, I used to avoid, when I was in default, I would avoid phone calls. I didn't even want to open the mail. I wasn't in a good space. But once you reach out, I have found that a lot of times with the student loan companies, they want to work with you. They want to figure out how to plug you in a program, whether they adjust your rates according to your income, or maybe you can forbearance for a while and say, like, listen, I'm out of work right now, but in 6 months I'll start making payments. You know, I really encourage you to reach out and get help. If you want to call me, I can give you more specific information. But there are also, like, this website has some great resources. So we're going to page through the book a little bit, past the credit report, past the student loan section, read over that, past the section on goals, past the section on expenses changed during the year, to, all right, so once I've made that list, how do I prioritize what to pay? So this section helps us to understand the consequences of missing or late payments. And they're kind of assuming, like, for instance, you know, you have a lot of debt and in a month, maybe you can't pay every single thing. So it helps us to figure out which one should we pay and to create a plan. So the question that they ask us is, how do you decide what debts to pay first? So let's open up the section, and it talks about weighing the risk of making a late debt payment. And let's face it, I mean, none of us enjoy not paying our bills, and none of us enjoy paying them late. Sometimes it's an easy fix. Like, for instance, if you have a bill that falls due at the third week of the month, but you get paid on the second week of the month, a lot of times you can call the company and ask them to change your due date. And that can make all the difference in the world, because then you're paying your debt on time and you're not racking up those fees. We talked about those hidden fees when we were talking about kind of looking at our, you know, what are some of the good reasons to budget, is because you can lose a lot and just have that debt grow if we're not getting it paid on time. But this particular exercise looks at, you know, what if I have to be late on something? You know, how do I make that work in my finances? So the first thing we're asked to consider is what helps us keep our job. So for many of us, that means a vehicle. I commute an hour a day. I wouldn't be able to hold my job if I didn't have a vehicle. Now, when I lived in a city, I lived in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, I didn't own a car. And so I was able to just, you know, hop on a bus, hop on the subway. But, you know, when you live in a more rural area or a smaller town, um, sometimes the bus is very convenient here in Knoxville and can get us from point A to point B. But sometimes we need to rely on our vehicle. So, you know, looking at our list of bills and what's demanding us to pay first, you know, definitely thinking about the vehicle can be an important consideration. I would say the most important to me is my rent. Rent, mortgage, and utilities all prevent eviction. So, you know, really, most of us would say, yeah, we know, like, you know, pay them all at the top of the month. Um, but there are other people that, you know, don't always make those decisions. I had a lady once explain to me when she gets a lot of phone calls from debt collectors, she would end up paying the ones who hounded her the most. And that's how she got behind on her rent. And she said she didn't grow up in a house where they regularly paid rent at the beginning of the month. So she didn't have good ingrained habits of paying rent first, paying her utilities. And, you know, it made a difficult situation for her when she made those choices. So I always suggest, you know, when I was working with clients individually, please pay your rent, your mortgage, and utilities first, and we can figure everything else out as we go. The next priority they suggest you to consider is any court-ordered obligations, like child support, fines, and fees. And the reason is obvious on that one. You do not want to be in trouble with the courts. You can also find that I would add in there things like getting that student loan debt straightened out, and if you owe the IRS, because they can garnish your wages. They can take from your Social Security check. So if you owe the government money, they can withdraw it. And nothing is more disappointing than when you do your taxes and you don't get a penny of that return because it's going to pay back debt to the US government. And I will say that if you don't know, here at CAC, we have a tax program, Vita Taxes, and we do taxes for free. You can make an appointment. You can have a volunteer, like a lot of them are retired accountants or students who are going to college for accounting. They're trained and they are wonderful. They do my taxes every year. And they will do your taxes for free and get you the most money. And if you're having trouble with some of these fees that might affect your tax return, they will help you. They're really, really good. Much, much better. I want to bring it up now, but before we hit the holidays, I know sometimes it's tempting, and I've done this myself. I'm not going to say that I've never done this, to go to a place and get those cash advance loans on your taxes, especially when you start thinking about Christmas time and the holidays and wanting extra money in your pocket. If you can hold out and let Vita Tax do your taxes, first of all, you won't be paying a fee. I once paid over $400 to have my tax return done. I could kick myself now. I didn't know about Vita Taxes. And although you don't get the cash up early, you get all of it later. And so, you know, I really want, if you can not do that, that would just end up being more money in your pocket. All right, so after our automobile consideration, our rent, utility, and mortgage, anything court ordered or federal, then to take a look at other debt. Your credit cards, debts that are in collection, any loans from family and friends, all of the things that we have to pay. And kind of take a look at them and think about the order that you want to pay them. Now, the question is, you know, what order should things be paid? Well, I always recommend, again, the rent, mortgage, and utilities first. And after that, I mean, there are things that you can consider, things that are maybe in collections, things that it's recommended that if you have a credit card with a very high APR, to pay those off first. I once was really drowning in debt at one point in my life, and I sat with someone and got a consultation for free. It was someone who worked in a bank. And I had even been considering, like, should I just go ahead and claim bankruptcy? And he was startled that I asked about bankruptcy. He said, no, 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 no. He said, what you need to do, and it's basically this exercise, is take a look at all your bills and make minimum payments on everything, but pick one of them, one with the highest APR he recommended, the highest interest rate, and make your bulk payments on that. So if the minimum payment is $100, try to pay $150. Like, try to get that paid off first. And my husband and I did that. And it took us many years, but we sat down with these debts that were like hanging on our necks. And we said, okay, we're going to hit this credit card, that stupid credit card that I got. It started off at a $700 credit card limit. And by the time I was done, I owed thousands of dollars because it had gone through all kinds of collections and whatnot. So, take a look at your bills and decide, pay your usual payments, and what can you give just a little bit extra love to get that paid off. Really, it's your decision. On the back of that page, they suggest doing a snapshot. Again, this is stuff that we've covered before, detailing the money coming in. So all of your work, government programs, like if you're on TANF, if you're getting WIC or food stamps, any disability or child support, total that up, then subtract your expenses and look at what the difference is. So they have another tool that they recommend on the back of the page that you can go to the consumer program online and look up your money, your goals. We're going to take a look at some of that stuff in another training. But this is just basically a way to kind of get a grip and make some decisions. It's, it's not easy. It's not quick. But if you have a plan, it really, really helps. So ultimately, in terms of prioritizing, we want to pay all our debts on time, but sometimes things happen. And this tool, rather than, kind of panicking, helps you sit by planning. One of the things that they asked me to remind everyone is that if you do choose to pay some things late, it can have an impact on your credit score, which we know, and that could impact not just getting loans, but sometimes nowadays landlords can look at your credit card, not your credit card, I'm sorry, your credit score, and make decisions about renting to you. The other place that I've been really surprised to see the impact of a credit score is if you try to open an account with certain banks. Now, we have some banks here in Knoxville that we call second chance banks. And these second chance banks say, you know what? We know that stuff happens in life, and you might have messed up with a bank before. Maybe you owe someone money. Maybe your credit score's low, but we're going to take a chance on you and help you get back on your feet. I highly recommend going with a bank. Fifth Third is a bank. That's a second chance bank. Home Federal is another bank. A lot of the credit unions in town will work with you. And what's awesome is not only will they open you an account, but they would love it if you would go in and ask to speak to a financial counselor and to sit down and let them walk through this stuff with you. I was at a training one day. It's some of the training to prepare me for doing these classes, and we had a guest speaker in the class. She was a branch manager of a bank, and she said, everybody knows the name of their doctor, but no one knows the name of their banker. And when you ask Americans what your two biggest concerns are, now, of course, with COVID, times are different, but typically before COVID, people's two biggest concerns were finances and health. Well, you know who your doctor is, but you don't know who your banker is. And, times are changing with everyone doing banking online or on your phone. That's a great convenient tool, but it doesn't give you the chance to get to know your banking staff and to know maybe about some of the programs that they have available. So if I don't cover something, or you feel like you can get better information from an actual, bank, please consider going to your bank or opening a bank account and going and working with the staff there. They have great options to walk things through. They want you to do better financially. They have an investment in our community. So anyway, budgeting, yes. So having a budget helps us to plan ahead and reduces unpleasant surprises. So then, having to prioritize different payments. Now, this next section we're going to skip. How do I respond to a debt collector? Don't you skip it. Go in, please, and read it. But I wanted to focus on some extra help, some resources for various sections that, if it's not covered here, who can you go to for more help? And there's an opportunity, if you open up your insert page, there's an opportunity to fill in the blanks on a few local resources. So I wanted to share a few with you today. Legal assistance. So Legal Aid of East Tennessee is awesome. They have worked with my clients. I had a gentleman who was totally overwhelmed with cash advance loans. He had taken out way too many of them. And he would start off the month with $900 coming in on his Social Security. And by the time he went around town to pay off all of his cash advance loans, he was only left with $100 a month to live on. And he came to me in tears. He was ashamed. He felt so bad that he had gotten caught up in those loans. And we reached out to Legal Aid of East Tennessee, and they helped us. They walked us through step by step how to address the issue. They've also been really helpful if you're being called to court, if your bill has gone into collections and they're threatening to take you to court. I definitely recommend reaching out to Legal Aid. When you call, you got to call like 9 o'clock in the morning to do an intake with a woman on the phone, and someone will get back to you. So definitely Legal Aid is important to have in your resource guide. Now they bring up credit counseling, and I want you to be so careful. Sometimes as I'm driving along the road, I see signs like credit counseling, we'll get your debts paid off. Yeah, but they charge a fee, and not all of these companies are legit. There's a lot of scams out there. So that's why I recommend, before you kind of connect with a credit counselor, if you're overwhelmed with credit card debt, talk to one of those second chance banks like Fifth Third Bank. You can also call the Knoxville Urban League and Home Source. Those are both nonprofits here in Knoxville. And they do a lot of work with housing, but they also do a lot of work with consumer counseling, credit counseling. So I suggest that you call your substantial nonprofits first before you get pulled in and on promises from, who knows what kind of credit counselor. Now, there are some legit places out there. And in fact, in your booklet, they have a website, usa.gov/debt. But just be really careful, I guess, is what I'm suggesting. The other section they have listed is medical bills. And I wanted to talk a moment about hardship programs. If you are low income and you have high medical bills, you may be eligible for income-driven hardship plans. And so basically what I suggest, I had a client who had very low income. I think he probably had about $700 a month. And he had ended up in the hospital with thousands upon thousands and thousands of dollars in medical bills. And we talked to the social service department, who connected us with their hardship program at the hospital. And we filled out the application. It wasn't too hard. You have to list your, your income and expenses and provide proof. And they broke, first of all, a lot of the debt they forgave. They wrote it off. He wasn't, and then a very small portion, he had a very manageable payment plan. So if you get a medical bill that, you don't know what you're going to do, talk to them in the social service department at the hospital or at the doctor's office, and see about any hardship programs. Now, there are more great resources at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and here is their website. These books, I find them to be really handy tools. And again, as with any of my trainings, use the material that you find helpful to you and your family, and discard the rest. We just want to have these conversations and to support one another, reinforce good, tangible goals on how to build our finances and to build our family.